Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. You can find me on Twitter X at Forrest Hodl. And we have a guest on the show today, Rajat Soni. I just want to get a little bit of an introduction of who you are and also how you got interested in Bitcoin to begin with.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Forrest. Really appreciate you inviting me on. One of the things that really got me to start learning about Bitcoin was simply the fact that our money is being debased. Somebody posted about the Bitcoin standard on Instagram, and I listened to the audiobook for that. One of my coworkers told me about Michael Saylor at some point. I don't remember whether this was 2020 or 2021, but he told me about Michael Saylor, and I started listening to his videos. He was part of the reason why I got orange pilled. I only started learning about Bitcoin in either 2020 or 2021, like I said. But once I started learning about it, I think I went in full time and I was just learning as much as I could every single day. I'd listen to podcasts. Like there's this one podcast with Safety Namus, the writer of the Bitcoin Standard. He has a really in depth conversation with multiple people on his channel. So he talks about different topics. He talks about literally anything that comes to mind. Like if you have a question about Bitcoin, you're probably not going to be able to search for it on his channel, but he's had that conversation somewhere in a conversation with somebody in that on that channel. So I thought that was great. I think I probably listened to maybe 50 to 60 of his podcasts. I listened to a bunch of other podcasts. I read audiobooks. Those are the things that really got me into it, that really got me to start understanding what this thing is and looking at it from different perspectives. I think that's one of the important things though. Learning from different perspectives makes your education journey so much easier because you don't have to really think about everything from your own perspective. You don't have to think about everything you don't know. If you hear conversations between people, you're going to see that these people are going to bring up certain topics that maybe you didn't even think about, right? As a beginner, you don't know what you don't know, right? And one of the things that I found really interesting in the beginning of my journey was listening to debates between Bitcoiners and gold bugs, because gold is definitely the biggest competitor for Bitcoin. The US dollar isn't even close. Like there's no reason to even think that the US dollar competes with Bitcoin. It doesn't, because the US dollar is just something that can be created out of nothing. So if you listen to gold bugs talk about gold and debate Bitcoiners, that's how I came to most of my conclusions. I heard Peter Schiff, for example, talking to people. He was saying how no, you can create more gold, you can create more bitcoins, you can create more because you can create altcoins, but it doesn't work that way, right? It's like if you created fake US dollars, it doesn't mean that there are more US dollars in the system. Same thing with Bitcoin. If you create a random meme coin, it's not like there's going to be more Bitcoin in the system. You just created a new network. It's like creating a new Facebook. It's like creating a new Twitter, a new app to record your software. If you don't have, or sorry, for your podcast, if you don't have the network, it's not going to make a difference to the total supply. So if somebody comes up with some random meme coin, like Donald Trump came up with his Trump coin, it did nothing to the price because the Trump coin is not competition for Bitcoin. So I think there are different ways that you can approach this. There's different ways that you can start learning about this, how you can broaden your knowledge, how you can deepen your knowledge. But to me, the best things were audiobooks and podcasts, and that's how I got to the point where I am today. Like I said, the main reason why I even got in was because our money is being devalued. It when I during the pandemic, uh, there were people getting 500, 1,000, $2,000 paychecks for sitting at home while I was working my ass off. I was working at a company. I was working at a bank. I was working every single day, while I knew people who didn't have to work at all and they were getting the same amount of money as me from the government. Well, not the same amount, maybe about half, but they were getting money for free. It's not like I got a raise, but their earnings were diluting my earnings. So my expenses were going up. I was essentially subsidizing their standard of living, even though they're not working and I'm working. To me, that's socialism, right? That's just a way to move wealth from one person to another. So, I mean, you have to find a way to get out of that. If you don't find a way to get out of that, your wealth is going to continue to be diluted, continue to be diluted. And I think that's why I really focused on Bitcoin, because I realized that in this current system, because all the money that we have can be created out of nothing, more and more people can keep borrowing more and more dollars. Our value is going to continue to be diluted until we find a solution that allows us to not have our wealth diluted, and that solution was Bitcoin. Once you start going down that rabbit hole, you'll start seeing all these things. You'll start making all these connections between Bitcoin and, let's say, we had a conversation. We talked about how Bitcoin stops war. We had a conversation. We talked about how Bitcoin increases energy abundance. You start making all these connections after you actually understand that Bitcoin is money. And to me, I mean, it took 3.5 years to get to this point where I think I have a sufficient amount of knowledge. I still don't know everything. I'm still losing. I'm still not even close to knowing everything. Like, I probably don't even know 95% of the things that a lot of people know. There are probably people out there who've forgotten more about Bitcoin than I even know. Right. And that's just how it is. You can't delay your purchases though. You're never going to know everything. All you can do is put in the time, put in like the 10, 20 hours required to understand the basics. At that point, once you do that 10, 20 hours of research, you're probably going to want to own some for yourself. I've personally never met somebody who understands Bitcoin and doesn't want more. Even if new people don't come into this space, this is something that really changed my mind on Bitcoin. Even if new people don't adopt Bitcoin, the price is going to go up because the people who already own it will continue buying more. And that's just putting all of that together, just connecting the dots there. The education that I had showed me that Bitcoin's price is going up forever. There's no way to stop the price from going up. Nobody can stop Bitcoin. Nobody can stop the Bitcoin network. And here we are today.
You mentioned sort of noticing how the money that we were getting was being debased. Was this was that just evident to you like right away? Did you have some sort of knowledge of like the supply and demand of dollars being affected by new issuance of that, or was it like you saw prices of goods rising and you asked, okay, what is that? Like a lot of people think they know what inflation is, but they're just talking about like grocery price inflation and housing inflation. They don't understand that all of that goes back to money inflation. Did you know that when you started thinking about like CERB and all of this money getting printed and stuff? This video is brought to you by Stampseed, which offers a titanium seed plate and stamping kit, which in my opinion are the best tools possible to secure your Bitcoin for generations. Their titanium plate is fire resistant and it is rust resistant and it is made out of titanium. It's going to last. And their stamping kit is great. I don't know if you've ever tried to use any other ones, but they bounce around. They don't do a deep indentation. Their stamping kit really works very well. Don't use paper to store your seed phrase. Don't cheap out on some DIY situation. Store this for the long term. Your Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more in the future. Just do it properly with Stampseed and get 15% off using my code BTC, not crypto, 15.
Yeah, so I have my CFA designation. I have my my chartered financial analyst designation, and we talk about monetary policy, fiscal policy, economics. We talk about all that. We talk about how governments need to be able to control the money supply to be able to control the economy. Essentially, if the economy is going to zero, then they need to be able to do something to step in to stop it from going to zero. Essentially, and I knew that money was being printed. I just didn't really care before that. I didn't really because before that, think about it. Before that, it was 2-3% inflation. 2-3% really doesn't feel like anything. But then during the pandemic, when you see that people are getting paychecks for free, when you see that people are sitting at home and they're producing less, you know for a fact that your prices aren't going to increase by 2 to 3%. And I feel like the book, Safety and Melissa's book, The Bitcoin Standard, really got me thinking a little bit more about how much higher inflation can go and why prices rise in general. And then on top of that, so I haven't read, full disclosure, I haven't read Jeff Booth's book, but I've listened to like every single conversation that he's had. I've listened to all of his talks. He explains it really well. Your prices should be coming down. Your prices shouldn't be going up, regardless of what happens. It doesn't matter whether the economy is strong, whether the economy is weak. Prices should be coming down. Actually, in a strong economy, I would say in a stronger economy, prices should be coming down because more and more people are willing to contribute their resources to produce goods and services. Keep in mind, in the CFA, I did 3 years of education. I went to I did an undergrad in finance and accounting. We didn't talk about anything related to what money really is. And that's I think understanding what money really is what got me thinking. The first like 6 or 7 chapters of Saifedean's book, they're just telling you the history of money, how money started, where it's going, what it is. Talks about gold. He doesn't even touch Bitcoin until maybe 7, 8 chapters in. So understanding how money works is the basis of everything here. If you don't understand how money works, you're not going to be able to explain why Bitcoin is important. I asked you a question yesterday, or when we recorded our conversation. Um, how would you teach people that real estate prices are going to go down forever in terms of Bitcoin? It's the same thing for everything else. How do you know that the price of apples is going to go down in terms of Bitcoin forever? It's because you know that new Bitcoin can't be created. So less and less Bitcoin is going to chase apples forever. Less and less Bitcoin is going to chase houses forever. Because let's say, for example, the price of a house today is 4 Bitcoin. At some point, that price is going to drop to 1 Bitcoin. It's going to drop to zero point 0.5 Bitcoin, zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. It's going to keep dropping because less Bitcoin is available to chase that house. So fewer and fewer people are able to pay Bitcoin for that house. The people who have Bitcoin may not even want to be able to, they may not want to give away their Bitcoin for a house. On the other hand, like the complete flip side of it is the US dollar, where more and more dollars are being printed. More and more dollars are chasing apples. So even apples, something that we can create, we can grow out of the ground. Like we can grow off a tree. We can plant seeds and we can have more apples in the future. The dollar is being created at a faster pace than that. So where does that take you? The price of everything rises. In terms of dollars, the price of everything is going to go up forever. And this is again something that we didn't learn during. There was nothing about this in the CFA. We didn't even make those connections, right? We never even thought of the possibility that the US dollar could have competition. And once you see that, what like for me that was it challenged everything. It actually made me a little angry because I wasted so much time learning about this financial system when it's not even based on real money.
That's so interesting that that you feel that way, and I definitely want to get into some more about the CFA. I know there's a bit of a controversy that you've had because of what you talk about Bitcoin, but I want to touch on something else first, and we'll get back to that. For me, I found it was like I found when I understood inflation, monetary debasement, I actually and I understood that humans were fundamentally deflationary, how we invent things, we create better technology. Building a house today is so much easier than building a house 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? It takes less human hours, less materials, less everything. Those materials take less energy to produce, all of this stuff. Once I realized that, even 2% inflation or 0% inflation is just not correct. We should be actually have living in a deflationary environment. And the reason we're not is because that percentage is being stolen away from us by central bankers and people that can print money for no cost. I felt like it was a huge injustice. I felt wronged by the whole system. And I think that was a big wake up call to me when I realized that humans were deflationary. And that just, it was just like, why do we live in an inflationary environment if we are fundamentally deflationary? It felt totally wrong to me. And then I needed to find a system that was also deflationary, which was Bitcoin, right? It has this programmed issuance that gets halved every roughly 4 years. And it just, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's do that. Um, but I do, yeah, let's get back. Actually, sorry, before the CFA stuff that I wanted to ask you, when you started learning these kind of things, like, Bitcoin is a big rabbit hole. You start to learn little pieces and things start to make sense. There's little connections here and there. And you understood that money was being debased, and that um, throughout time, that's the wealthy has sort of realized that to some degree. And they start to put their money into different assets. When you started to realize this, did you start to try to find different assets? Like, did you think maybe gold was a good investment, or S&P or real estate? Did you start to kind of, instead of holding cash, did you start looking at different investments, and then did that eventually lead to Bitcoin? Can you tell me a little bit about that sort of transition to Bitcoin?
So I was investing in stocks before that, but I didn't really do it for the inflation. I just did it because I thought, oh, I'll have more money in the future. I didn't really think of it like, oh, If I buy stocks, I'm going to be beating inflation. I'm going to be doing this and that. I mean, that's the purpose of investing. Even the CFA, we talk about that. How do you beat inflation for your clients? That's very important, of course. But I didn't really think of it from that perspective. I didn't really think of it as, oh, the U.S. government can create as many dollars as it wants to, right? I think that was what clicked. That's what helped me to click, to make that concept click. So I was buying stocks. I've never bought real estate. I've never not bought real estate. I have my own house, but I'd never bought rental properties. I think that was something that a lot of people don't avoid. And if you know what I talk about on Twitter, on X, even most of my YouTube videos, I'm basically just talking smack about real estate. Almost every single post is like that, right? Because I feel like in the current system, the housing prices are just massively overvalued. We use housing as a savings account, and we shouldn't be using housing as a savings account, especially in my culture. A lot of people who are Indian, they just see housing as a way to save. Like they just see it as a way to protect their wealth for the future because it has worked. It has worked in the past, right? You've always been able to put money into housing and you borrow money to buy it. You can bring your future consumption to the present because you can borrow money to buy houses, meaning that over time, as more people buy houses, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. More people buy houses, prices just keep going up and up and up, and they just keep rising. So the people who thought of housing as a savings account, it worked out for them because housing prices are designed to go up. The entire system is designed to increase the price of housing. But once you start seeing why house prices go up, it becomes easy not to want to buy houses. Because the only reason why house prices go up is because people seem to be thinking that house prices should go up, and eventually that won't carry weight anymore. I don't know if you've heard of this quote. Um, there's something about how during during bull markets everything can rise, but during bear markets the only companies that what was it? When the tide comes in, I think Warren Buffett said this. When the tide comes in, you know who's swimming naked or something like that. I don't know what the quote is, but basically, I think when prices start coming down, let's say if house prices drop 90%, that's when we're going to know that most people don't actually trust the housing market because they're not going to want to buy back in, right? If Bitcoin price drops 90% today, because Bitcoiners completely, not completely, but because Bitcoiners they've put in the time and effort to actually understand what Bitcoin is. If Bitcoin's price drops 90% today, I'm going to be buying more. I don't care if it drops 90%. If the protocol stays the same, if the supply stays the same, I'm going to buy more. I don't care if the price drops because I know it's a result of people who don't quite understand what Bitcoin is selling what they have. They're just dumping everything in the market. Or if Satoshi Nakamoto comes in and sells all 1 million coins, it'll dump the price, but if you know what happened, then you have a reason for buying it. The thing is with real estate, with stocks, I think most people just buy them blindly. Like if the S&P 500 were to drop 90% today, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know. It could happen, but I don't think it will. But if it were to drop 90% today, I think people are going to lose hope in the S&P 500 and they're not going to want to buy back because they're just going to think, "Oh, it was supposed to go up. It didn't go up." Most people who buy the S&P 500 don't quite understand why they're buying it. Like they don't understand the fundamentals, right? I think that's what Bitcoin did for me. It got me to actually start asking questions about the fundamentals, start looking at things from first principles, as in why are prices even going up in the first place? Why do we need to buy stocks? Why do we even before I understood Bitcoin, I didn't quite understand that, oh, you need to buy stocks because of this and that. And majority of the people who I had conversations with had no idea either, right? They just bought them blindly. Even a lot of people who have done their CFA, they can't tell you the basis of their statements. They can't tell you why the S&P 500 keeps going up. They're just going to keep telling you that, oh, it's cash flows, it's tax benefits, it's this and it's that. You're buying companies. But the reason why it's going up is because more and more money is being added to the economy. They can't tell you that. And that's the problem. With Bitcoin, because nobody can create more of it. On the other hand, with stocks, people can issue more shares. With real estate, people can build more houses. They can build higher. With Bitcoin, because you can't issue more Bitcoin, the price is going to go up forever, and it's going to outpace everything because most people don't have an allocation. So that's where I guess my alpha comes in, where I keep telling people buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. It seems like such a simple strategy, but It works because most people don't have any.
If you're interested in getting yourself some Bitcoin, I would recommend taking a look at Bitcoin Well. There's a link in the description, and if you use my referral code, you'll actually get some free Bitcoin. They're the best place, in my opinion, to buy Bitcoin because they're a non custodial exchange, which means they never hold your Bitcoin for you. When you send them money, they'll send you Bitcoin directly to your wallet, and you can buy on chain or Lightning through them. And they have a swap function at a 0% fee, so you can swap in between the two. They also have non-KYC options, and they're available in Canada and the United States. So check them out. Link in the description. That goes to support this show. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, for me, I also realized that there's a lot of risk. I was trying to figure out where to allocate my money, and I was looking at S&P 500. Everyone says, "Oh, if you don't know what to do, you just buy the S&P 500 index. It's market cap weighted, so it's going to allocate more to bigger companies, and these bigger companies, keep accumulating cash and all this kind of stuff." But there's 500 companies in there. A bunch are straight up zombie companies. The only reason they have any sort of profits is directly because of inflation. They're not outpacing inflation at all with productivity. They are just, closer to the money printer because they can issue cheap debt and they can kind of continue doing what they're doing and just keep getting by. There's a ton of companies like that in the S&P 500. And then, yeah, I learned about share dilution. And to me, it was like, oh, I'm opening myself up to a ton of counterparty risk with buying this bundle of stocks. And then I looked at Bitcoin and I said, well, the price is really a reflection of, people's sentiment around it. It's sentiment driven. And if the price goes down, like you said, 90%, nothing about Bitcoin fundamentally changes. Like, unless that was the reason that it went down. But let's say it's not. Let's just say it's, hype or, something else going on, like macro or whatever. Nothing changes about Bitcoin. And so there's no risk. There's no new shares there's no new printing. There's nothing. Like Bitcoin is an idea, and money, like everything like that is money, has to come down to this belief that it is money at the end of the day. And you can, like, a lot of people I've talked to about Bitcoin, they think, well, like the reason we have that I use Canadian dollars is like the government wants it in taxes. And it's like, that's a reason to use it. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that is one little use case that you have to consider at like one day of the year. But the rest of the time, why do you have it? Whereas like Bitcoin, you can start to understand there's a cost of production, there's the security, there's the immutability of the ledger, there's the transparency of the ledger, and all of these things you can individually value, and combined it becomes a very good idea of what money could be and what money is in the form of Bitcoin. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just to me, it's like, yeah, Bitcoin's just a no brainer once you start understanding risk and you start seeing that the risk to Bitcoin is so minimal compared to the risk to almost anything else. Like, I can't think of anything less risky than Bitcoin, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Bitcoin is the least risky asset because it's the only asset that's a bearer asset and you can send it across the world. Anybody can take custody. Doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have. Like, you can't have a gram of gold, but you can have 0.001 Bitcoin, and anybody can take self custody. Why would you go to a jeweler to buy a gram of gold to save your wealth? I feel like before this, it was very difficult for people to actually save. Today, it's much, much easier. Because of Bitcoin, it's just getting easier and easier. It's becoming more accessible to everybody. It's becoming more widely used as money, as a savings vehicle. And I think that's what's going to lead to this massive adoption over time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I wanted to get your story a little bit. I noticed that you got into some hot water, some controversy around being a CFA that also talks about Bitcoin publicly. Can you tell me, just like run me through of like what happened there? Like, what was the problem about talking about Bitcoin and being a CFA?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why the CFA came after me. So what I'll go back a little bit. So I started posting about Bitcoin in 2023, August of 2023. I started posting regularly, and I only started posting once I really understood it. Once I really saw where it was going. So once you understand Bitcoin, you know it's going up forever. You know for a fact that the price is going to go to, like I said, a million, 10 million, $100 million. It's going to go up forever. And I think some people took offense to that. They thought, oh, this guy's saying this. He has no reasoning behind it. He doesn't understand it. I don't quite understand it, so I'm going to report him. Maybe that's what that's what was going through people's minds. And somebody reported me to the CFA Institute, and they said that I'm making claims about Bitcoin that aren't realistic, that that are probably putting people in a position where they're going to make the wrong investments. And because I have my designation, I guess my opinions, they said something along the lines of how my opinions matter more than just the average person. I don't quite agree with that, but I guess what they're saying is that because I did this time, I did the education, I went and I studied for finance, people will actually listen to what I'm saying. So they said to me that I should stop posting about Bitcoin going to these prices. And I explained to them that this is my reasoning behind it. Bitcoin's price is going to go up forever because there's a limited supply and because the dollar has an unlimited supply. I actually created a webinar not too long ago. So I was selling this webinar to people and I sent them this webinar and I got them to watch it. And they came back to me and they said, "You made these claims. We don't see these being true. We don't see these being possible. Um, Explain the basis of your statement." So I told them, it's going to take me like 5,000 hours to teach you all of this. Can you explain to me the basis of people telling me to invest in the S&P 500? Because people are constantly telling you buy the S&P 500. They just expect that the S&P 500 is going up forever. I saw a post a few days ago. It said without really any due diligence, without asking his followers, this guy said 99% of people should just buy index funds and call it a day. How do you know that that's applicable to every single person in your audience? What if the person's 95 years old and they just need a way to pay for their funeral costs and all that stuff? They don't want to leave their family with debt. What if that's their purpose? What if in that time when they pass away, the S&P 500 price drops 90% or 70%, 50%? What happens in that case? So I asked him. I actually asked him that directly. I said, what's your basis for recommending the stock market to people?" And what happened was, I think because they kind of saw the gap in their understanding, they escalated the issue to their head of enforcement, and the head of enforcement just basically emailed me. He said, um, "Don't worry about it. Just make sure that you distinguish between fact and opinion." And I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with telling people when I'm thinking about things versus when I know things for a fact. Like I know for a fact that there's going to be a block on average every 10 minutes. I think because of how Bitcoin works, I think the price will go much, much higher. So I think differentiating between that's perfectly reasonable. I get where they're coming from. But to me, it was kind of sad that people went after my living. They went after my designation because I was telling them about Bitcoin. And clearly Bitcoin has done very well since I started posting about it. So I don't really I don't even think of that as a bump in my trajectory towards where I am in Bitcoin. I think it actually helped me. Like it got me to where I am because it got me to start thinking even deeper. Because if the CFA Institute, if people who have their CFA don't quite understand Bitcoin, is there something that I'm missing, or is this just something that I studied deeper than a lot of other people with the same designation? So I came to the conclusion that I just went a lot harder onto studying Bitcoin than everybody else, and the people around me, the people who have their CFAs who don't understand Bitcoin, they're missing out. And if you have an advisor who's a CFA or any kind of advisor, CFP, um, any designation really, and they're telling you not to buy Bitcoin, you should ask them if they've done their due diligence on Bitcoin. I think that's the way to go. If people are going to report me for talking about Bitcoin, I think you should report your advisor for not talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the other thing too here, Rajat, is just that we're so early with the amount of knowledge we have. Like you talked about the fact you don't know everything about Bitcoin. I don't either, but we still know so much more than the average person out there, which is crazy to me. I get questions all the time on my Discord, on my comment section, and I'm just like amazed at how like early in the educational side of their journey they are, because there's just like, oh, I was there years ago, I was learning about those same things years ago. um and the conviction that builds as you learn is, yeah, like obviously you have so much conviction over this, you can say like, oh, I think the price is going to a million over time. But it takes education, and exploring this space before you can feel that way. So somebody that hasn't been there, they see this and they think, oh, that's crazy. Like nothing does that. And it's like, yeah, because we've never seen anything like Bitcoin before. So that's why you think that it's not possible. Um, but yeah, have you actually like told people to buy Bitcoin? I'm curious about that. Like because to me, I've told a few of like my family that they should, but then I've kind of backed that back and I say, well, you should really just look into Bitcoin. You should study Bitcoin because once you do, it's inevitable that you want to buy it. And that's what I've had happen with my family is I've just told them about Bitcoin, different little pieces here and there. They've gone and looked at it, and then they come back to me and they say, "Hey, how do I buy this? I want to buy this. I want to own this." So I stopped telling people to buy Bitcoin. I just tell people to study Bitcoin. That's where I go for sure.
The way that I did it was for so let me give you the example of my sister-in-law. She didn't want to buy Bitcoin at all. She's very risk averse. She doesn't want to take any risk at all. Like she actually wants to avoid risk as much as possible. So what I did was I just took her phone. She gave me her phone. She's like, "Do what you need to." I bought Bitcoin for her and I just left it in her exchange account. Like she can sell it whenever she wants to. She's seeing the numbers go up. I actually went through it. So I got her to start buying at the bottom in 2022. I think it was December of 2022, a little bit after the bottom. I got her to start buying then. And in that time, she's seeing her portfolio grow like crazy and she's excited. She's asking me more and more questions, right? I think for her, I think different people are in different stages of or different people take on an investment in different ways. So, for example, she's in the stage where she saw the number goes up, and now she's starting to ask, why is the number going up? For other people, they have to ask why the number is going up before they can actually experience it. Like for some people, they want to know as much as possible before they start buying. For her case, it was that she had to see the number go up because I know for a fact that she would not have bought on her own. She wouldn't have looked into it. She wouldn't have bought. She would have stuck with buying index funds or she would have just kept cash. But for other people, I tell them, hey, study Bitcoin. You need to study Bitcoin. Like with my wife, for example, I'm constantly talking to her about it. She probably knows just from my conversations that she's had with me, she probably knows more than the average person. Like she knows how to send a transaction, how to receive a transaction. So she's getting to that point where she's understanding it. But let's say, for example, with uh, let's say with my cousins and my other family friends, if they're not too open to it, I don't push them too much. If they're not like if I tell them, "Hey, Bitcoin is going up, I think you should buy." And they say, "No, I'm not going to buy. I don't want to." Okay, don't buy. Perfectly fine. You'll come back to me at some point and you'll ask me where this is going and why it's going where it is going. And those people have been asking me. They've been asking, "Hey, how did you know that it was going to go to 100K? You told me at 30K to buy it. How did you know it was going to go to this point? Do you think it's going to pull back? Do you think this? Do you think that?" And they start asking questions. I think in general though, like let's say for example if it's family, you can probably tell them to buy. But if it's people who you don't know, if it's like on X, generally my statement is to study Bitcoin. I wouldn't tell some random person that I don't know to buy Bitcoin because I don't know what their financial position is, right? So let's say, for example, if somebody is in $100,000 of credit card debt, maybe Bitcoin could help them. But I mean, I don't think that they should take that risk. I don't think that's, I don't even, not even a risk. I think it's a bigger risk to have that credit card debt. But in that case, I think you should pay off your debt before you start buying Bitcoin because that credit card debt is a guaranteed loss of 20% per year, while Bitcoin is a potential gain of, let's say, 50% per year. So if Bitcoin doesn't give you the returns and you have credit card debt, let's say you buy Bitcoin at the top and it starts falling, you're going to panic and you're going to sell. You're going to think, "Oh, I should have just used this money to pay off my credit card." In those cases, I think it's a case by case situation. Like if let's say for example, if somebody does have $80,000 of credit card debt and they put in the time to understand Bitcoin, maybe they might choose to buy Bitcoin instead of paying off that debt. And I'm not saying that that's the way that you should go. I'm not saying that that's the best solution. Every solution has its own trade-offs. You're taking a risk, you're getting an associated reward based on that risk. So the person who has that $80,000 of credit card debt, if they go all in on Bitcoin, maybe they'll be able to pay off their credit card debt a lot sooner. But there's also the other side of it where let's say they bought the top and Bitcoin's price drops 80% from wherever they bought it. Now they have a lot less money and they still have that debt. So again, it has to be based on what you know. based on how you feel, how you understand risk, how you understand volatility. If you don't understand the basics of investing, then you probably should stay away from Bitcoin in general because you don't know what it's supposed to do. In those cases, I would say study Bitcoin before you buy it. But if I know somebody personally, I'm going to tell them to buy Bitcoin. I'm going to say, "Hey, give me your phone. I'm going to buy Bitcoin for you because I care about them. I know them. I know how they think. I know that this will benefit them in the long term." On the other hand, if it's somebody I don't know how they're going to react over the long term if it does drop significantly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's called personal finance for a reason. It's very personal. It's really case to case, and yeah, I've gotten my brother into Bitcoin a bit, and I keep sending him these pieces of news of like these bullish events and stuff around Bitcoin. And every single time, I've done this for months and months. Every single time, he's like, "Damn, I should have bought more." And it's like, "Yeah, man, you should have. I told you that multiple times." And the whole time, it's like there's that idea about investing where you're climbing a wall of worry, and that's the case, right? Is like at 70,000, I was like, well, this might be a local top, but then it rips up to 100 and you're like, well, 100, there's this sell wall. I don't know, but then it rips up, 108, and beyond as we're going to see in the future, in my opinion. So the whole time you're just unsure about like, am I buying the top?
Yeah, I think no matter what happens, you're always gonna feel like you're paying a lot when you buy Bitcoin. That you're always gonna at 50K, I felt like I was paying too much. At 25K Canadian, I felt like I was paying too much. Today at like 140K, I still feel like I'm paying too much, but I know for a fact that over time it's gonna go up. So don't really care.
100%, yeah. And the other thing too is Bitcoin is still in this space. It's a $2 trillion asset. So and the world of assets is huge, like whatever 700 trillion or something like that globally. So it can still be easy to ignore. And I don't know, for myself, the way that news is made and social media and everything, you get locked into this echo chamber. You think, well, doesn't everybody know that Trump just signed an executive order to look into digital assets, and all these states are going to adopt it, and like the most likely prime minister, our next prime minister here in Canada, has used Bitcoin at Tahini's. Like, doesn't everybody know that? And it's just like, no, they don't. They have no idea, because it is still easy to ignore Bitcoin somehow. But to me, it's like the biggest thing in my life as far as like news goes. Yeah, Bitcoin is incredibly important in that way. I wanted to ask you a little bit too. One thing that we haven't talked about is altcoins. Did you get into altcoins in your journey towards Bitcoin? In my opinion, altcoins are very much always trying to connect themselves to Bitcoin. Even now we see this with like Cardano or whatever. They're like, oh, we're interoperability with Bitcoin. They're still trying to connect themselves to Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin Cash, which is literally using the same name as Bitcoin. There's all these other coins out there, right? Like, did you fall into a little bit of that? How did you go from that into Bitcoin? Can you tell me a little bit about that story for yourself?
I did. So at a point, I actually had a diversified portfolio of shitcoins. So I had I had Cardano. I had at one point I had, what was it, Terra Luna, whichever one was the one that dropped from like $100 all the way to like zero. I had that. I had Avalanche. There's one called Curve. I had Ethereum. I think everybody's gone through the Ethereum phase. I had I forgot what there's an Oracle one. I forgot, a Chainlink. That's what it is. Chainlink. I had that. I had a ton of them, but I think one of the things that really got me to start looking further into why Bitcoin only is the fact that the majority of these coins have a founder. They have a pre-mine. Like Ethereum, for example, they had a 70% pre-mine, I think it was. XRP is something that a lot of people try to tell me about. They try to tell me you should buy XRP. I had some XRP at one point, and I'm happy I got rid of it. Even though it went up, I'm happy I got rid of it because now I don't have to think about when it's going to tank, and I'm okay with that. So all these coins, the way that I see it, there are I think there are so there are three uses for a form of money, right? You can have a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. The way that I see it, almost every altcoin is just trying to skip the store of value phase. They're trying to go straight into the medium of exchange and unit of account. And you can't have a money that's not being used as savings. Even the US dollar, for example, it's a currency. People don't see it as money, but people do use it as savings. There are a lot of people around the world who are using it as savings. I know a lot of people who are very uninformed on how money works. They're financially literate. So they use the US dollar as savings. The US dollar is still a better form of savings than most of these altcoins because the US dollar is actually backed by an economy. I wouldn't even say it's backed by an economy. It's used to purchase the goods in the economy, and anybody can use it to purchase those goods. You can't really use altcoins to purchase anything, even with Bitcoin, for example. Okay, so for Bitcoin, you can use Bitcoin to buy US dollars at any point. No matter what happens, you'll be able to sell your Bitcoin for US dollars because Bitcoin has such a deep market. It has such a deep liquid market. And no matter what, even if the price drops, if the price increases, depending on how many people want to exchange for US dollars, you'll very likely be able to sell your Bitcoin for US dollars. There's no guarantee of that for any other altcoin. I know for a fact that Bitcoin's price is not going to go to a penny, 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, a dollar, because there are so many people who want Bitcoin. There are so many orders. For example, I think there were earlier last year, I think it was, there were so many orders for $12,000 Bitcoin. So if you think about it, that's the lowest price it'll go to. If if there are 21 million coins in demand at $12,000, then the price literally can't go below that because whoever wants Bitcoin at $12,000 will buy it. If somebody's willing to sell it, they'll buy it. Over time, all we see is that as people figure out what Bitcoin is, they don't want to sell it for dollars. On the other hand, I've talked to so many people telling me I posted a couple of videos about how XRP is a scam. Not a scam, but it's basically designed to steal your wealth from you. I posted about how Ethereum is pretty much the same thing. It's centralized. It's a cryptocurrency that's designed to basically take your wealth from you. And I got a lot of pushback. A lot of people didn't say I'm going to use Ethereum or XRP or Solana as money. They said I'm going to use them to get more Bitcoin. So that just shows you, like, all these coins are a scam. They're not even using them for the purpose that they're supposed to be used for. Like, for example, people tell me, "Oh, Ethereum is a decentralized internet." Okay, I can see the value of that. I can see what the value of that could be, but at best, Ethereum is not money. It's a company. It's a business. Same thing with XRP. XRP says that they can do something like, what is it, cross border payments, but you can do that with any altcoin. You can Cryptocurrency doesn't have barriers to they don't have borders. They don't have barriers for where you can send your cryptocurrency. You can do that with Bitcoin. You can do that with Lightning. You can do that with Ethereum. You can do that with any cryptocurrency. I can create some random cryptocurrency in my basement and I can sell it to somebody with the basis that, oh, this is cross border payments. This is for cross border. But that's the thing. I think a lot of cryptocurrencies, like I said, they're trying to skip that medium, that store of account or store of value phase. They're trying to go straight into the medium of exchange and unit of account phases, and that's not how money works. You have to have a group of people who want to hold a form of money in order for them to accept it as payment. For example, with the US dollar, we have a lot of people who want the US dollar because they need to pay taxes. And that's a utility for the US dollar. The US government is the strongest force in the world. They have the military backing them, and they're going to force you to pay your taxes, right? But who's going to force you to pay your taxes in Ethereum? Who's going to force you to pay your taxes in XRP? Who's going to force you to make payments in XRP? From what I know, people don't even want XRP, right? The majority of the supply of these coins is held by a small group of people, and they're slowly dumping their coins on the market. I was looking at a chart for, let's say, Solana, for example. The market cap since 2021 has increased by like 90%, but the price of the coin has only increased by 10%. The reason for that is that more coins are being dumped into the market. More coins are being printed, added to the market, and the people who have Solana are losing value because more coins are being created and added to the market, and it's at the expense of everybody who holds Solana. It's either because of staking, it's because more coins are being printed, whatever the reason is. I don't really care what the reason is. If I know that there's an unlimited supply coin like Solana, like Monero, like Ethereum, I don't care what the value of the coin is. I don't care what the utility of the coin is. To me, Why would I buy something that somebody else can create out of nothing? Why would I buy that? There's no reason for me to buy it. I know the US dollar can also be created out of nothing, but of course it has that entity behind it that makes that enforces the use of the US dollar, but there's nothing like that for Ethereum, nothing like that for Solana, nothing like that for XRP. They'll tell you all of these benefits that they have, but I think all roads just lead to Bitcoin. No matter what happens, people like I said, people are trading their altcoins to get more Bitcoin. They're not trading their altcoins to get more of that altcoin. They're doing it to get more Bitcoin. I think that just shows you what the reasoning behind all of these altcoins is. The reasoning behind the majority of altcoins, I'd say 99.9% of altcoins, probably more than that, 99.999, is to extract wealth from people who don't understand how markets work. That's the goal. That's the end goal of the majority of these creators. They don't care about creating the best form of money for the world. All they care about is taking your wealth, and you're falling for that trap when you buy them.
I think a lot of people, when they get into cryptocurrency, they don't get into the history of money and what makes a good money. They just start to think like the importance is this other types of technology, smart contracts, things like this. And how I look at that is all of these altcoins, I really do think that they're just test nets for different applications that could be built onto layer twos of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the dominant chain, it is the most secure chain. And if it needs to be changed at the base layer, that is possible, although very difficult. Some sort of improvement, a BIP, a Bitcoin improvement proposal, or maybe just it can be done on a layer two, smart contract capability, stable coins in different types of currencies, things like that. It's all possible to do on Bitcoin. And I think that the altcoin scene is really just a test net for the different possibilities of programmable money, and it will all be eventually done on Bitcoin. I still see the space. I think like literally like all altcoins beside Bitcoin are just some form of rug pull. Like either it's very quick with a meme coin, or it's very slow with something like XRP, or they just dump just really slowly and just build hype throughout that, so they still have the ability to dump their coins on retail. I think it's just all a form of rug pull. Just depends how fast they're pulling the rug out.
I think with the meme coins, at least you know that they're going to go to zero. Like, people probably won't argue with you, telling you, "Oh no, it's not going to zero." There's this, there's that benefit, there's this benefit, there's cross border payments, there's the decentralized internet. They won't tell you all of that because they know that it's going to zero. Like with altcoins like these, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, all these other things, those guys are genuinely trying to convince you that their coin has more value than Bitcoin. Like that's their goal. Their goal is to replace Bitcoin, but they won't be able to. At least with meme coins, like when the Trump coin came out, nobody told you, "Oh, it's going to replace Bitcoin." Some idiots out there did probably think that, but it's not like Trump's team came out and said, "Yeah, we're trying to replace Bitcoin."
I saw some things on Twitter with people saying, "Oh, if he puts this into the reserve, I mean, it could flip Bitcoin's market cap." Not like it could flip Bitcoin as a utility or anything, but like, yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's hilarious. What are your thoughts about an SBR happening in the States or anywhere else? A strategic Bitcoin reserve. Have you thought about this a little bit, and what would be the implications of something like that happening?
I think what's going to happen is, let's say the U.S. government wants to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin. I don't think they're going to get to it. I don't think, unless they tax people for their Bitcoin, I don't think they're going to get to it. For example, I was looking at the numbers for the ETFs. They have 1.1 million Bitcoin. The ETFs can't print money to buy Bitcoin. They can get their customers to pay them money to buy Bitcoin. On the other hand, with the US dollar, what happens is if the US government starts borrowing money to buy Bitcoin, they're going to severely devalue the US dollar. They're going to make it so that the US dollar's value drops so much, people are not willing to sell their Bitcoin anymore for US dollars. And that's just going to lead to fewer and fewer Bitcoin available to be purchased. So what's going to happen is, and in the best case scenario for the US government, or actually for really anybody, the best case scenario is that the US dollar continues to have value, and the US government just basically creates a floor price for Bitcoin. For example, they were saying how they're going to buy something like 550 Bitcoin a day. If anything, they're going to be just continuously buying 550 Bitcoin no matter what. Like with the ETFs, we have a constant flow of money into Bitcoin, but there's no guaranteed flow. For all we know, with the ETFs, they could sell Bitcoin. With the ETFs, they may not buy for a couple weeks. Same thing with MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy could get liquidated. Something could happen. But the US government is on a different level, right? Because the US government can't be liquidated, number one. Number two, they can print as much money or they can borrow as much money as they want to. They can get the Federal Reserve to print it and give it to them. And that's something that just changes the entire market. Right now, if we look at the price of Bitcoin in terms of US dollars, all that shows us is how much somebody's willing to give away their Bitcoin for. If somebody's willing to give away their Bitcoin for, let's say, 104,000 US dollars, that's the amount that it's like a proportionate number. So there's 104,000 US dollars for every, let's say, every Bitcoin available. If more and more dollars keep getting pumped into the market, that $104,000 is going to rise to 108, 110, 120, 150, 200. It's going to rise. It may not rise very quickly. I personally think it will, but I like, I'm open to the opportunity of I'm open to the reality of the situation could be completely different from what I'm thinking. I don't know if it'll rise very quickly, but eventually it will rise. I have this this way of thinking where Bitcoin will run out at every single price, no matter what. I think what's going to happen is the US government is going to just accelerate that process. As the US government buys Bitcoin, it's going to bring buyers, or sorry, it's going to bring sellers into the market that probably were never thinking of selling for a very long time. Let's say, for example, if somebody says, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin at $1 million, I'm going to sell Bitcoin in 10 years when it hits $1 million, and it hits $1 million in a year. They're going to take that Bitcoin off the market and they're going to bump the price up and they're going to keep bumping the price up because that's just how the market works. If there are more dollars available to be bought, the price has to bump up. The people who have dollars already, the people who can't print dollars, are the ones that are at a loss. So let's say, for example, if you have $100,000 saved, 100, let's say you have $104,000 saved, you can buy one Bitcoin with it. If the US government starts flooding the market with dollars, the value of your $104,000 decreases in terms of Bitcoin because what they're doing is they're buying every single Bitcoin that's available at every single price until they have whatever Bitcoin they want. And on top of this, of course, there's going to be game theory. I mean, game theory is the key here. If the US government starts doing this, we're going to see China start doing this. We're going to see Russia start doing this. We're going to see India start doing this. All of these countries, they may not be able to print money for Bitcoin, but they can produce resources. They can produce, let's say, for example, Russia, they can produce energy. They can start selling their energy for Bitcoin. China creates pretty much everything, right? They create some of everything, right? They could start selling those goods and services for Bitcoin. India creates a lot of products and services. They can create those services and sell them for Bitcoin. All these massive countries, I think they're going to follow suit. Once the US government announces it, I think it's just going to change the market completely. We're no longer going to see I think we're never going to see a five-figure Bitcoin, first of all. I don't think that's ever going to happen again if the US government announces that they're going to buy Bitcoin. It's going to change the game completely. And then on top of that, once Bitcoin's price goes to a million, I think we're going to go to 2 million, 3 million, 5 million very quickly because it just changes people's perceptions of how Bitcoin works. It changes their value of Bitcoin. It's like it's a paradigm shift. I think it's called the something window.
The Overton window.
Yes, Overton window. I believe what that means is basically it's how you think of the market.
The Overton window is like what is politically acceptable to talk about.
So right now, let's say politically, it's politically acceptable to talk about Bitcoin being at 100K. At that point, once Bitcoin goes to a million, people are going to accept it. Like the people who reported me when Bitcoin was at 30, 40, 50K, I said Bitcoin is going to $1 million. Once the US government starts buying Bitcoin, it's going to make it politically acceptable to talk about a $10 million Bitcoin, a $50 million Bitcoin. It's going to keep rising because the US dollar is going to lose a significant amount of value. And it's going to be a paradigm shift for a lot of people. Right now, a lot of people have just accepted Bitcoin is at six figures. Um, it'll probably come back down to five figures at some point. But because the US government may start this strategic Bitcoin reserve at some point, they're going to accelerate that process of Bitcoin going to seven figures, eight figures, nine figures. And by then, because Bitcoin has a finite supply, by then people are going to be willing to pay $1 a Satoshi.
I already value Satoshis as a dollar in my mind. I value them that way. Yeah, there's a couple things there. There's this idea about Bitcoin being a Veblen good, which means that the the price, as the price increases, it becomes more valuable. And I think this is true because it becomes less risky. People see it as the risk being taken out of it, and they see the price going up. They want to basically they value it at that price in their mind, and so it goes up even higher. They continue to value it at that price. Um, the other idea you said there was that the only way for some of these nations at some point in the future for them to acquire Bitcoin will be to exchange goods for Bitcoin. And I think that this is an inevitability for not just nations, but for individuals. I think there will be a time where people will stop accepting fiat. I think that the only way to, for their Bitcoin. So, like, there will be a point where the only way to acquire more Bitcoin is to directly trade for it, to do time and product or service selling that to actually get more Bitcoin. There's going to be a point where fiat becomes worthless in that way. In my opinion, because Bitcoin is just better money. It's going to take out all of the bad money at a certain point, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's going to break all the networks that we have today, all the networks of broken money that we have. All these countries are creating their own money because they don't have a they don't have a neutral form of money that they can rely on. They have to, let's say, for example, if they want to survive if they want to control their own economy, they have to create their own currency. Every single country has to create their own currency. Essentially, not every country, but most countries seem to have their own currency. But they have to do it because they want to control their economy. And with Bitcoin, they no longer have to do that. They no longer have to worry about economic policy, fiscal policy, and all that stuff. All they have to worry about is creating products and services, and that just changes everything. It completely reverses all of the negative effects that the US dollar has had on the world.
Yeah, totally. And they've had a lot of negative effects on the world. They've impoverished a lot of countries around the world with their currency, basically causing other currencies to inflate higher than they are, and so they can continue to export their goods at a cost that is, favorable globally and all this. And really, it all comes down to hurting the person that is accepting the weaker currency, that can't get access. Like you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, you talked about how some people treat U.S. dollars as a savings mechanism, and they totally do around the world. In Argentina, where they have the peso that was inflating away so high, it's like all they wanted was U.S. dollars because at least it's not inflating as bad. It's the cleanest shirt in the laundry, in the dirty laundry of government currencies, and they don't trust Bitcoin because they don't know enough about it or whatever, right? And they don't realize it's even cleaner. It just got freshly washed. It's very clean. So I think it's just a matter of time before people begin to have these conversations, listen to podcasts, listen to your channel, check out other stuff. The Bitcoin Standard. This kind of There's enough education out there. It's just on the individual now to start wanting and start caring about this enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, completely agree. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, and that's exactly what applies here. You can't force somebody to study Bitcoin. You can tell them, hey, if you adopt Bitcoin, your life is going to get cheaper, your life is going to get easier. You're going to be able to increase your standard of living. But you can't force them to do that because if they don't want to take control, then nothing's going to happen for them.
Yeah. You mentioned MicroStrategy as well. I wanted to I mean, you've made some great videos talking about MicroStrategy. I think MicroStrategy is a very interesting company. I mean, they're literally like they have their own money printer. They're selling their own equity for dollars and buying Bitcoin, buying this hard asset, raising their net asset value. What are some of the interesting things that you think, or what are some of the things you think are interesting about MicroStrategy?
So, first of all, just before we go into anything, I like to think that MicroStrategy is an investment and Bitcoin is a savings account. So, the difference between that is that you expect an investment to fluctuate or to change over time. Let's say, for example, with MicroStrategy, they're constantly changing their policies. For example, they said they're going to issue more shares. Um, they said that, oh, sorry, they have a CEO, they have a person who can actually change the rules, the things that the policies that they follow. So MicroStrategy is an investment because it changes because it's a business. On the other hand, Bitcoin is a savings tool because it doesn't change. So, what I would recommend just right off the bat is you don't need to buy MicroStrategy if you don't want to. It's up to you if you want to do it at your own risk, but MicroStrategy could fail. MicroStrategy could go to zero at some point. There could be something that's happening in the background that maybe we don't even know about. So, just right off the bat, I want to tell you MicroStrategy should not be your only retirement plan. You need to have Bitcoin as well. So, I know a lot of people who have no Bitcoin and they just have MicroStrategy because they think they're going to outperform Bitcoin and they think it's guaranteed because it's happened in the past. But what if it doesn't happen in the future? So that's something that I think people need to know first of all. The second thing that they need to know is that MicroStrategy is basically just a way to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, and then this company is very likely going to use it as capital in the future. So let's say, for example, um, they may be able to use their Bitcoin to get fiat, to borrow fiat, and then they can lend that fiat at a spread. So let's say, for example, they borrow US dollars at 5%, and then they lend them to people who want US dollars at 8%. And maybe that's a good, I don't know if that's a great business plan for them. I'm just saying that this is possible. I'm not saying this is guaranteed. I don't know if this will happen, but that's just the possibility here. They can also become a Bitcoin bank where they start lending Bitcoin. But again, you have that risk where if your borrowers don't pay you back, then you could have to default on your obligation. So MicroStrategy could go bankrupt. So those are things that you need to consider. With that being said, I do think MicroStrategy is one of the best companies in the world. If you're trying to invest in something, if you're trying to invest in a different industry, if you're trying to instead of investing in yourself, like let's say instead of building your own business, instead of investing in your relationships, if you have some extra money, if you want to buy some MicroStrategy, go for it. I think it's a great company because of what they're doing. They're just accumulating as much Bitcoin as they can. They're borrowing as many dollars as they can to accumulate Bitcoin, and the dollars that they're borrowing are devaluing constantly. They're constantly being debased. So worst case scenario, MicroStrategy continues to accumulate Bitcoin. At some point, Bitcoin keeps rising in price. I'm a strong believer that Bitcoin's going to go much higher based on the conversation that we've had so far. I think Bitcoin's price is going to go much higher, and because of that, I think that MicroStrategy's asset value is going to go up. The potential for what they can do with their money is going to go up because they're going to have bigger and bigger savings to rely on. So they can do more things. They can hire the best talent. Maybe, for example, they could start a layer two. They could do a lot of risky things and they could completely change Bitcoin and they could potentially outperform Bitcoin for a very long time because of those risks that they're taking. But again, you have to look at the opposite side of it as well. MicroStrategy could go to zero. Their stock could drop significantly. Nobody can stop that from happening. If Michael Saylor turns out to be some bad actor who has all the keys and he takes all the Bitcoin, what are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about it. So I think that MicroStrategy is a great company to invest in. If you want to put a small amount of your portfolio into it, go for it. But the majority of your portfolio should be Bitcoin. If you have Bitcoin in cold storage, keep that Bitcoin in cold storage. Don't exchange it for MicroStrategy. If you're getting more cash flows, maybe put that cash flow into MicroStrategy. I wouldn't swap my Bitcoin for MicroStrategy. I don't see a reason for that. Even Michael Saylor, what he's doing right now, he's issuing shares to buy Bitcoin. What he's doing is he's selling overvalued shares, in his opinion, at least based on what he thinks. He's selling overvalued shares and he's buying Bitcoin with it. So what he's doing is he's selling his shares at a certain premium to the amount of Bitcoin that they hold. So that's called a net asset value premium. For example, at one point, the net asset value premium for MicroStrategy's stock was something like 3 times. So their shares were being sold by, or sorry, their shares were being sold for 3 times what they were backed by in terms of Bitcoin. So let's say they were backed by 1 Bitcoin, they were being sold for 3 Bitcoin. So what Michael Saylor was doing is he was issuing more shares and he was selling them on the market and he was buying more Bitcoin with it. So he was selling something worth 1 Bitcoin and he was buying back 3 Bitcoin with those proceeds. To me, that's genius. I don't know what anybody else has to say about that, but to me, that's genius because you're basically selling, he said it himself, you're selling $1 for $3. And then you're adding that value to the company. You're giving that value to your shareholders. A lot of people are angry that he keeps issuing more shares. To me, that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with him issuing more shares because he can execute his strategy much better if he has more capital. If he can sell more shares, accumulate more Bitcoin, he can easily become the biggest holder of Bitcoin in the world and nobody can compete. To me, that's a monopoly on its own. I think MicroStrategy has that massive monopoly. Nobody's going to be able to keep up. How do you value a company that holds 2.5% of the global money supply, of the global capital? You can't. It's impossible. So to me, MicroStrategy is massively undervalued because of the potential for Bitcoin. It may seem like it's overvalued because markets are valuing MicroStrategy based on the future potential of what the company can do. And we have no idea what that future potential is. To me, a 2x multiple is worth it because the company is being sold at 2 times the amount of Bitcoin that they hold. To me, that's worth it. I'm okay with it. Keep in mind, I don't have all my eggs in one basket. I still have that cold storage Bitcoin. So if MicroStrategy does go bankrupt, I can rely on that. To each their own, though. If you don't want to buy MicroStrategy, perfectly fine. If anybody in your audience doesn't want to buy MicroStrategy, perfectly fine. I don't see a problem with that. Just make sure that you have at least a little bit of Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot to learn about MicroStrategy. I mean, you dived. I mean, I think you scratched the surface there. There was so much good information there, but that's really scratching the surface. And I kind of look at MicroStrategy now as like the altcoin that people are, they're thinking, oh, I can get MicroStrategy. It's going to appreciate more than Bitcoin, and I can sell it at some point and buy Bitcoin with it. It's kind of that altcoin trade that you were talking about earlier, but now it's with MicroStrategy, which its underlying is Bitcoin, so at least it has that sound layer money underneath it. And yeah, there's so much to it. Like to me, my MicroStrategy allocation is in registered accounts where I can't have Bitcoin. And I'm not alone with that. There's people all over the world that they don't even have access to like the Bitcoin ETFs in America or in their own country, but they could buy MicroStrategy. So there's all these kind of pools of capital that have access to MicroStrategy and not to like Bitcoin, other Bitcoin derivatives. They might be able to hold Bitcoin cold storage, but maybe for whatever reason they don't feel comfortable or they don't know how to yet or whatever, right? But of course they should learn to do that. But MicroStrategy is sort of like it's a different instrument. It's an equity as opposed to Bitcoin. So it can go into these funds as well. It just got into the QQQ. So there's all these passive buyers. There's all these tailwinds of Bitcoin, and then there's additional tailwinds for MicroStrategy. And of course, there's additional risk, as you mentioned. There's additional risk of the counterparty, of the CEO, of the custody. Right? Are there Bitcoin in custody? Is that actually safe? If they do end up lending it out, is that a strategy you believe in that has a good risk to reward? Because there is risk to lending, of course. So yeah, it's there's so much to consider, but to me, MicroStrategy is a fascinating position within my own portfolio. And a thing that I was just thinking about, how you mentioned like the US might not be able to get to 1 million Bitcoin. I wonder if there's a scenario in the future where they could pay to have access to MicroStrategy's Bitcoin, where MicroStrategy could still be the holder, but maybe they borrow it from them. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I don't really see a reason for that, to be honest. I don't see a reason for them wanting to borrow Bitcoin, mainly because what would they do with that Bitcoin? If MicroStrategy is still holding it, are they going to be paying for their expenses with that Bitcoin? If they're just going to rehypothecate it and say that they're going to use MicroStrategy's Bitcoin as their strategic Bitcoin reserve, I think that kind of breaks the purpose of owning Bitcoin in the first place because they don't own Bitcoin of their own, right? They just borrowed it and they basically added it to their spreadsheets and they're acting like it's their own. So they don't get the full benefit of owning that Bitcoin. They could do that. I don't really see a point in it though.
True. Yeah. I guess my idea would be that they get the price appreciation of it. But yeah, I would have to think about that a little bit more. It was just a thought that I had because I do think it's going to be tough for at this point in Bitcoin's history for the government to access 1 million coins, say if the Lummis bill goes through. But yeah, yeah, it's just a thought that I definitely have to explore a little bit more to see if that is a possibility.
I think there's something else though. Like let's say they confiscated that Bitcoin. But what could happen there is I think the equity markets are just going to lose a ton of trust. and people are going to want to move their wealth out of the US markets because if they can steal MicroStrategy's Bitcoin, they can steal everybody else's wealth as well, right? I mean, in reality, they can do that anyways, but it just hasn't happened. So people still trust the markets. And if they do that, if they just go out of their way and they take MicroStrategy's Bitcoin, I think it would just break the entire Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, no, that's probably true. Well, I think we should wrap up here soon. So I just got a couple quick questions for you, Rajat. What is your, if you had to sum up, what would your favorite thing about Bitcoin be?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think what Bitcoin does is it separates wealth from the government. And I think that's really important. It separates wealth from really any individual, and nobody can stop you from using your money the way that you want to. I guess that ties in with government creating policies that stops you from using Bitcoin, that makes you use Bitcoin or makes you use your money a certain way. It stops you from using your money. Like for example, with the current system, your government can enforce that you only have $10,000 when you cross the border, and that rule has been there for like 80 years or something like that, 70, whatever the amount of time is. But in that time, the value of that $10,000 has gone from, let's say, it was $10,000 when the rule was created. Now the equivalent of that would be like $80,000. So you should be able to cross the border with $80,000 worth of money in your pockets. Let's say, if you go back in history and you adjust for inflation, because Bitcoin is completely separate from governments, because nobody can control it, nobody can stop it. It's the first neutral form of money. Even with gold, gold is neutral, but you can't take it across borders. How are you going to take $1 million worth of gold with you? It's impossible. You can't. With Bitcoin, you don't have to take anything physical with you. And I think that really, I think it scares government. And I think it's a good thing that it does scare them because it tells them to step back. You don't have control over this thing. If you try to screw people over, they're just going to leave, and they can take their wealth with them without you knowing. And what that, again, the beautiful thing there is that nobody can stop you from using your Bitcoin the way that you want to. You can spend it on whatever you need to. You can use it as a savings account. You're not forced to spend it like the US dollar. For example, the US government, the Federal Reserve, can issue more US dollars. US government can borrow more US dollars, and they can dilute your savings to make it so that their economy looks stronger when it actually isn't stronger. So again, that's separate, completely separate from how governments work. Governments can't create more Bitcoin out of nothing, so they can't artificially make their economies look stronger, and it actually makes them do real work, create real value in order to increase to improve the size of their economy. I think everything is also going to be more real, right? In the past, because we have fake money, we have fake relationships, we have fake food, we have fake we have a fake economy. Basically everything is built on, let's say for example, I saw this tweet where it said air this is the new economy. Airbnb doesn't own any houses. Turo doesn't own any cars. What else was there? Amazon, something about Amazon. Amazon doesn't sell its own products. This is the new economy because people are basically just middlemen. All these companies are just middlemen, and that's what people are profiting from. With Bitcoin, we don't need middlemen. We don't have any middlemen. So you'll be able to transact directly with your merchants. You'll be able to send them Bitcoin instead of having to rely on a bank, instead of having to rely on a government. I think that completely changes really everything about how money works, how we transact on a day-to-day basis, how we even think about money in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's so impactful and so underrated. I think people will begin to realize how important that is. Some people do know that, you know, if they have some sort of tyrannical kind of government or situation where they need access to their funds and they can just memorize 12 words and go wherever they need to, transact with whoever they need to. It's permissionless, censorless money. It's a better system. It's just as simple as that. Rajat, just I'll put your information below, but if you want to let everybody know where to go, what to look for your content out there.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to, you can find me on YouTube. Just search for Rajat Soni. I guess Rajat Soni Bitcoin works as well. You'll find me on there. Um, and you can find me on Twitter as well. Rajat Soni Finance on Twitter. There's no I in the finance. So Rajat Soni Finance with no I in the finance. Both of those are my main accounts. I'm constantly posting on those. Um, I offer I do one-on-one consultations. I have a private group, all that stuff. If you look at the description of any of my videos, you'll be able to find it there.
Sweet. Awesome. Thanks so much for the interesting conversation. I appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.